We have many projects. Would you say the projects that are related to engineering?
Yes.
Yes? So the projects that we have related to engineering are, in the Cabot Institute, are very, very broad, and they range from understanding future cities, thinking about how cities need to fundamentally change in terms of how they get energy, food, water, transport, how they organize themselves in order to become energy efficient and actually be appropriate for future societies, especially in the face of the fact that almost all of the major changes in the Earth's population relate to the fact that people are moving much, much more to cities. And the cities are where most people live. We also have projects in energy, ranging everything from how do you make resilient energy infrastructure that will survive floods and earthquakes. And we, of course, have extensive expertise in modeling risks and hazards, whether they be earthquakes and floods.
Yeah, I mean, you mean your PhD students, how can they collaborate? I mean, we could collaborate in different ways. I mean, like, for example, I mean, as we mentioned before, we could, for example, establish, common projects. If one of your PhD students is interested in working with a particular researchers in University of Bristol, they could spend, I don't know, 3-6 months, working on a particular project. We could generate, interesting research, maybe publish a couple of papers or whatever. But I think there are plenty of opportunities there, for, your students to come to Bristol, maybe even your staff as well, like your researchers, maybe do a sabbatical or, spend a few months in Bristol. And, or maybe even, to think about potential projects that, maybe, projects in which we are able to get funding, from both sides, from CONACYT, maybe as well funding from the EU or funding from the UK, to work on projects in which, across the universities. And I think there are plenty of opportunities. I think the key is really, for the people to start talking, to keep in touch, and maybe to try to generate ideas that may be interested for both of us, for us and for you as well.
Like most places, a PhD student starts with a good project that often starts from a good collaboration which stimulates very interesting ideas. At Bristol, because of the interdisciplinary research environment, the PhD students have the opportunity not only to do that project, but to engage in a much, much wider community. So, for example, we spent a fair bit of time during our visit talking about hazards, whether they be volcanic hazards or earthquake hazards or flood hazards. And we spent a fair bit of time talking about the science behind them, trying to understand them to the best we can, and talking about the solutions. You can't have a solution to one of these hazards without actually considering the people that will need to adopt these solutions. So there needs to be a social sciences dimension, a legal dimension, a policy dimension. And our PhD students have the opportunity to have a very nice project, but also to engage with this larger academic community via the interdisciplinary structures we have at Bristol. Well, again, those would probably, the most obvious ones would be the CONACYT scholarships. I think probably most of you have more access to information than we do, but the two things that we've been talking about most are either the full PhD scholarships, but also the exchange scholarships. So the PhD students who are already doing PhDs here can come to Bristol for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, however it is appropriate. One thing we've not talked too much about is that there is also scholarships for master's projects. So, of course, you could come to Bristol for only 1 year, do a master's project, and then perhaps come back here and do a PhD. There are many opportunities. That's the obvious ones, but there are a few internal Bristol scholarships as well that are available.
Come to Bristol, it's great fun.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students from UNAM already, and they seem to have a pretty good time. They like the city, they like doing the research. There are some strong themes within the University of Bristol that overlap strongly with UNAM. My particular field of volcanoes is a very good example. UNAM is, has a lot of very good volcanologists, and we already work together. The point of this discussion is to sort of think about how we might formalise that a little bit better, and particularly around student exchange and how we get students going in both directions, actually, coming here and coming to Bristol. That's what we perceive to be the best way to begin the really fruitful university-wide collaboration.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is, I think over the last, I don't know, few years, for example, in the water group, across geography and civil engineering, we have attracted basically the most, the world-class researchers, in the field, for example, of hydrology, and is, the same applies for volcanology. They have people like Professor Sparks, who are really world leading experts, in these fields, and I think, it's not something that you have, sometimes you have good people, in particular university, but I think in Bristol, in this case, I think we have a lot of very good people, in these departments.
Yeah. And to just sort of finish that is that, Bristol is it's just a very cool place to be to be a researcher and to live. I think of a typical day when I can start the day talking to someone who does volcanology, then someone who's studying the climate of the Earth 50 million years ago, and then go talk to someone from the Environment Agency and finish the day talking to someone who is developing aid relief in the Philippines or in Africa. And that's the type of dynamic interactions you have going on. And it is an incredibly cool city. It is just, look it up on Wikipedia. We have amazing artists, culture. It's a young, dynamic city with a great history and beautiful hills, which make the city very beautiful, but it can be a little bit hard to cycle around.
Quite hilly.
It is hilly.